Back in 2000, Al Gore and George W. Bush, both vying to become president, appeared at the Alfred E. Smith Memorial Foundation dinner, known for its barbs and political wit. Here's how Bush addressed the wealthy donors at that event.
This is an impressive crowd, the haves and the have-mores. Some people call you the elite. I call you my base.
Oh, and how the rich folks laughed and laughed and laughed. Some critics gave Bush a hard time for the joke, but alas, rich people problems. But by 2012, things had changed a bit on the campaign trail. During the 2012 presidential race, Mother Jones obtained video of a private fundraiser for Republican presidential nominee Mitt Romney. Romney told a small group of wealthy contributors that what he truly thought of the poors who supported his opponent, President Obama.
There are 47% of the people who vote for the president no matter what. All right, there are 47% who are with him, who are dependent upon government, who believe that they're victims, who believe that government has a responsibility to care for them, who believe that they're entitled to health care, to food, to housing, to you name it. But that's an entitlement, and the government should give it to them.
How dare they want health care and food and housing? The tape caused an uproar and likely played a role in his defeat. A little innocent, however, compared to Donald Trump, who reportedly told his friends, quote, "You all just got a little richer," when referring to the massive tax cut for the rich and for corporations that he signed into law as president. I'm joined now by Stephanie Ruhle, anchor of MSNBC's The 11th Hour. So we talked about this. We've talked about this a bunch, you and I, as we sat during the specials and we kiki on the side. I want to bring those conversations to the public. I mean, this really is, I think, the clearest example of the wealthy attempting to buy the White House. What do you think?
Not just the wealthy, the wealthiest. And they can. Remember, people understand, especially the richest of the rich, that Donald Trump is transactional. He keeps score of who stands with him. And right now, he's at the bottom. He's at a low point. So when you're looking at where he is, whether you're talking about Sheldon Adelson's widow or Nelson Peltz or Steve Schwartzman or John Paulson or Bill Ackman, they know that Donald Trump needs a positive headline. They know that they are the group of people, the quote-unquote ruling class, whose affirmation, whose support he has always been desperate for. So standing with Donald Trump now, what does that give you? A free pass, a get-out-of-jail-free card when and if he's the next president. And here's what's important for us to clarify. Now, lots of them are saying things like, it's immigration that matters to me most. It's inflation. It's Israel. Well, let's break that down. If it's immigration, President Biden tried to pass a bipartisan bill that mostly Republicans put together, and it was Donald Trump who blocked it. Joe Biden said yesterday he's planning to make a move to shut down the border. President Trump, former President Trump, isn't doing that. If it's inflation, which is a problem, Donald Trump has not offered one single policy solution that would curb inflation. And last thing, if it's Israel, last I checked, globalists, which Trump campaign has talked about over and over again, Charlottesville, or what did they recently say in a campaign post? The United Reich? None of those things are in support of the Jewish community. So what is this really about? It's about extending those corporate tax cuts, ensuring that there isn't President Biden's proposed billionaire tax, and making sure deregulation is headed their way. So to my last point, Miriam Adelson, that this is all about Israel, make no mistake. How does the Adelson family make all that money? Gaming, one of the most highly regulated industries in this country. If you ran one of the biggest gaming operations, wouldn't you love a direct call to the White House to make sure you've got no regulation standing in your way? And wouldn't they love to pay for that free pass? And they can.
Right. And they also, I think they own the Dallas Mavericks. So you're right. They absolutely have money on the table. And if you think about it, to the point you're making, Joe Biden has been trying to do something about inflation. Let me give you a couple of examples. Number one, over the last 4 years, the Justice Department and these high rents that people are complaining about. Over the last 4 years, rents have skyrocketed by an average of over 30% nationwide, and a major factor in our inflation rate. There are a variety of factors behind the increase, including an overall housing shortage. But the Department of Justice is now investigating another potential cause, a massive criminal conspiracy among large landlords. The investigation is looking into a scheme among many corporate landlords to artificially increase rents. You've got Ticketmaster. The Biden administration going after Ticketmaster and filed a lawsuit to break up Ticketmaster's parent company, Live Nation Entertainment, accusing it of operating an illegal monopoly. I could go on, but you also have President Biden personally going after grocery chains and Walmart and others and saying you need to lower your prices because they're artificially high, and some of them are actually doing it. So if those are the issues people care about, Biden's actually addressing them. Trump is just saying, no, give me money, I'll give you oil leases.
And guess what, Joy? That works. It was just a few weeks ago that Trump had a meeting with Harold Hamm and other oil execs where he laid out, you give me $1 billion and I'll give you whatever you want. If you're running a giant oil company, that's worth a lot of money to you. So the American people should pay attention to what former President Trump is offering these people, because they already have ultimate wealth. Now they're in a position where they could be buying ultimate power.
Right. And the thing is, I think what people don't understand, I mean, this New Yorker article essentially says that Miriam Adelson's husband, Sheldon Adelson, the late Sheldon Adelson, already played this game during the first administration. When it comes to Israel, he said, move the embassy. Trump said, how much money are you going to give me? Trump got the money and they moved the embassy. This has been policy, the opposite of U.S. policy through every administration, no matter how pro-Israel they've been. But he got it moved because he had money. Citizens United fundamentally, to me, changed the calculus for the wealthy. Now they can essentially say, I will give you this amount of money for these policies. That gets around our democracy, because if an administration is willing to literally change policy for cash, that's no longer a democracy. It's an oligarchy.
You are 100% right, but it's also absurd to think that President Biden hasn't been pro-Israel. He has been so pro-Israel that it has cost him some support from some progressives, right? Let's not forget that. What this isn't any big, wealthy GOP donors looking for one specific thing. What they want is a get-out-of-jail-free card for anything they could potentially want in the next 4 years. And former President Trump has made it clear that's on offer.
And the thing is that at the same time, you have Donald Trump representing himself as a populist. What's in this agenda for the regular average person who somehow thinks they're going to get paid? And I do not want to hear another person say to me stimmies, because the stimmies were because of COVID. You are not getting a stimmy, y'all. He is not just going to send black people checks because he likes black people. He doesn't like black people. That's not the plan.
And let's remember whose actual idea it was, who led the effort on the stimulus checks. It was Nancy Pelosi. It was right. Democrats and Republicans eventually signed on to it. And if you take huge issue with inflation, one of the reasons we have faced inflation is because of stimulus. It is because the government put so much money into this system. So it's kind of like pick your poison. One of the issues is President Biden does work with business leaders. He does work with corporate America, but the Oval Office does not have an open swinging door that they can parade themselves in at will. That's the difference. It's not that the Biden administration hasn't seen an extraordinary economic recovery. You said it earlier. Look at the stock market breaking record after record. Excuse me. Look at what President Biden has done for electric vehicles. President Trump and the MAGA base hate EVs. Yet it's Elon Musk who is now saying, I'm getting closer to President Trump, who's potentially going to raise money for him. President Trump's policies, in large part, don't align with many of these people. But the fact that they can call him on the phone and get what they want and need in 6 months from now, a year from now, that's a golden ticket, and they're looking for it.
An average voter, y'all can't call. He ain't taking your calls. This is literally government for, by, and only of the super rich, and y'all ain't them. Stephanie Ruhle, always fun, my friend. Thank you so much. I appreciate
Great to see you.
But we begin tonight with the rule of law. In our democratic system, it is the principle under which all persons, institutions, and entities are supposed to be accountable to laws that are publicly promulgated, equally enforced, and independently adjudicated. In a perfect world, the idea is to protect the rights of all people in our society. It hasn't always worked out perfectly, to say the least, in this country's long and difficult history, but that is the idea. Donald Trump and his MAGA Republican Party like to claim they believe in the rule of law, that they are the party of law and order. That is, unless they are the ones having to answer to it. At that point, the law and order stuff goes out the window, and MAGAs start argle-bargling about the weaponization of the justice system, rigged trials, and corruption throughout the deep state. That's all we've heard from them following a New York jury's verdict last week, finding Trump guilty on all 34 counts for falsifying business records in his attempts to influence the 2016 presidential election. And today, we saw the latest round of this theatrical performance of Republicans descending into the upside down. Attorney General Merrick Garland appeared before the House Oversight Committee and had to play whack-a-mole to the multitude of conspiracy theories spewed by the so-called party of law and order in their pursuit to protect not the rights of all Americans, but rather to distract from the unlawful transgressions of just one.
For the first time in American history, we do have a presidential administration that's working to put its opponent in jail. I mean, that's a fact.
Well, prosecutors aren't supposed to tamper with evidence, and it looks like that's what he did. He changed the sequence of the documents that he seized from Mar-a-Lago.
I'm sorry, that's a false characterization. I did not hear the words tamper in the statement that Mr. Smith filed. He did not use those words.
You come in here and you lodge this attack that it's a conspiracy theory, that there is coordinated lawfare against Trump. And then when we say, fine, just give us the documents, give us the correspondence, and then if it's a conspiracy theory, that will be evident.
Republicans repeatedly tried to make a connection between the DOJ and Trump's criminal conviction in New York, which was easily debunked by the adults in the room.
Did you select a judge in that case?
No.
No, of course not. The judge was randomly selected. Did you select the jury in that case?
No.
The jury was actually selected by Donald Trump and his attorneys. Did you reach a verdict in that case?
No.
Did you instruct the jury in that case?
No.
Did you tell the prosecutor what charges to bring in that case?
No.
I have to say I'm pleased and a bit surprised to see that the flag in this committee is still flying right side up, because they want to turn it upside down, even as they want to turn our justice system upside down.
Boom. Garland not only staunchly defended the mission of the DOJ, but warned about the dangerous consequences of what Trump and the Republicans have been doing.
It comes as individual career agents and prosecutors have been singled out just for doing their jobs. It comes as baseless and extremely dangerous falsehoods are being spread about the FBI's law enforcement operations. And it comes at a time when we are seeing heinous threats of violence being directed at the Justice Department's career civil servants. These repeated attacks on the Justice Department are unprecedented, and they are unfounded.
This hearing also comes as some of those same House Republicans are threatening to hold a contempt vote over the DOJ's refusal to share audio tapes of President Biden's interview with Special Counsel Robert Hur, who investigated his handling of classified documents. A healthy reminder that Trump still faces charges of stealing classified documents and secreting them at his house with zero consequences, thanks to a Florida judge who behaves more like a fan. Just the way Republicans like it when a Republican faces the justice system. Garland responded to Republican demands for the Hur tapes, which, to be clear, they want so they can try to embarrass the sitting president by playing them on Fox or on their goofy podcasts. Garland stated multiple times today that releasing those tapes serves no legitimate purpose and could harm the integrity of future investigations. Oh, and it's also worth noting that at the same time, these Republicans were blathering on about the so-called weaponization of the DOJ by President Biden. The president's own son was sitting in a federal courtroom for opening statements in his federal trial. Whoops. I guess Biden's weaponized DOJ dropped the ball on that one. I'm joined now by Pennsylvania Democratic Congresswoman Madeleine Dean, who was in that Judiciary Committee hearing with Attorney General Merrick Garland today. Congresswoman, thank you for being here.
Thank you for having me.
It is sort of basic civics 101, and one would think a congressman would know it, that a state trial and a state case has nothing to do with the Department of Justice. What was the point of that hearing today?
To mislead the American public. That's what the Republicans literally wanted to do. They want to continue, whether it's on newscasts or in the newspaper or in a hearing with the Attorney General of the United States, to mislead the American public. It is extraordinarily dangerous. And I don't think the American public is naive that there's a federal system and there's a state system. But we each, many of us on the Democratic side, had to just reiterate, please, Mr. Attorney General, what was your connection to the Alvin Bragg DA case, the state case, in New York?
Let's
nothing.
do a little. Let's do a little.
The answer is nothing.
We'll do a little Civics 101, just in case there's somebody out there that wants to send this clip to their Trumpy uncle.
Yes.
I'm just going to go through these very quickly.
Yeah.
If somebody is charged with a crime in the state of Pennsylvania, in your state,
Right.
does the Department of Justice determine who the judge is?
No.
If the person is charged in the state of Pennsylvania or the state of New York, does the Department of Justice choose what the charges are?
No.
Does the Department of Justice prosecute the case?
No, they don't.
Can the Department of Justice stop that case from happening?
No, they can't.
Can they intervene in any way?
No.
Did Merrick Garland have anything whatsoever to do with Donald Trump being charged with crimes in the state of New York?
Nothing.
Did he hire Alvin Bragg?
No.
Could he hire Alvin Bragg?
Bragg was elected.
Boom. Was Merrick Garland elected?
No, he was appointed.
So the person that is actually accountable to the people of New York in charging Donald Trump, that would be Alvin Bragg, right?
That's
not
correct.
Merrick Garland.
Correct.
Okay, I just wanted to make sure. And this is literally because I know that my audience is super smart and they understand that there's a federal system and a state system. But send this to your Trumpy uncle because they keep on bringing this up on radio shows and bringing this up. Let's
Send
do
it to
another.
my Republican colleagues.
Please. Oh, that might help.
On the committee.
Let's play one more piece. This is, to me, the most galling part of all, because this strikes me as trying to make another January 6th. Here is A.G. Garland responding to these conspiracy theories about assassination of Donald Trump.
Most recently, there was an allegation that the FBI was authorized to, quote, kill the former president. What impact does this type of rhetoric have on the career prosecutors and law enforcement agents at the Department of Justice?
This is dangerous. It raises the threats of violence against prosecutors and career agents. The allegation is false. As the FBI has explained, the document that's being discussed is our standard use of force protocol, which is a limitation on the use of force and which is routinely part of the package for search warrants and was part of the package for the search of President Biden's home as well.
Your colleagues know that, don't they?
Sure they do.
Why would they do this? Do they want to get FBI agents killed?
In service of one man, one now felon, 34 counts. I'm so proud of the New York system that the rule of law held, that we had by all reports, from reporters in the courtroom, the judge, the lawyers on both sides, prosecutor and defense, and 12 citizen strangers who did their job. They listened to the evidence. They applied the rule of law, and they came back with clarity, 34 felony convictions against a former president. Why are my colleagues doing it? In service and protection of a single man.
Yeah.
As the Attorney General has said, and I have been blowing the whistle, Joy, for 6 years on this committee, they are spewing misinformation and lies to deceive the American people and to tear down our belief in our system of justice, our electoral system. You've seen it. The Speaker of the House has been one of the architects of this. The misinformation is extraordinarily dangerous. Something A.G. Garland said, they have 115,000 civil servants in the Department of Justice. The spike of threats against them has gone through the roof.
And these members of Congress cowered in fear with all of you, everyone else, on January 6th, and they don't mind at all that police officers were hurt defending y'all. They have no problem with letting those people continue to be threatened, have Michael Fanone's mom be doxxed. This doesn't bother them. There are right-wing entities out there trying to find out who the jurors are and dox them. And meanwhile, you have this piece of news. Todd Blanche, Donald Trump's attorney, has now gone to Judge Marchand, and here it is, to ask that the gag order be lifted against Donald Trump so he can go back to attacking the judge's daughter. What kind of threat would that put these people in? Including the jurors at this point.
We're all at risk of threats of violence. It's true for members of Congress. It's true for election workers. We have an election coming up. We want public servants and citizens just saying, yeah, sure, I'll work that election day. I'll sit there at the polls for 10 hours. But no, not if I'm under threat of violence. This is extraordinarily dangerous. The AG has said it. And as I've said, it's so insidious that the very people who are decrying that Americans don't have faith in our Constitution and our Capitol Police and all of these things are the very ones who are sowing it. On the Capitol Police, you remember, I was there on January the 6th, got hauled out in a gas mask, held in a safe room for hours and hours with journalists, with Republicans, with Democrats. And we went back onto that floor, and many of these Republicans, including Speaker Johnson, voted not to certify the election.